Are you interested in the struggles of our children and the struggles that they face in the American classroom each and every day? Well, let me tell you about the first season of Teach the Babies with Dr. David Johns. It examines the impact of one of the most consequential Supreme Court cases of all time. I'm talking Brown v. the Board of Education. In each and every episode, Dr. David Johns talks to incredible educators and leaders as they all grapple with the question, has Brown's promise been fulfilled? Let me tell y'all something about Dr. David Johns. First of all, he's my friend. He is one of the most brilliant and revolutionary leaders of our community and society at large, and I truly, truly mean that. This brother is deep, and he is absolutely emphatically impassioned about our babies. This is a can't-miss deep dive into one of the most important issues facing our country, which is teaching our babies. And y'all should know that before he was a revolutionary national leader, David Johns started his career where? In the classroom, actually teaching the elementary school babies. I want you to like, subscribe, and share, and most importantly, listen as Dr. Johns and his guest explore these questions with you. You can find Teach the Babies with Dr. David Johns wherever you listen to podcasts.
Welcome to the Teach the Babies podcast with me, your host, Dr. David J. Johns. Around these parts, we celebrate the power of education to unlock opportunities for us all. Whether you are a parent or family member, an elected or appointed leader, or a concerned and compassionate citizen, this is the podcast for you to learn and grow in love. Ring the alarm, class is in session. Brittany Packnett Cunningham is an educator, activist, writer, and award-winning podcaster, leader, mother, and my friend. For those who don't know, she is an NBC News and MSNBC political analyst and host of Undistracted, a news and justice podcast with an intersectional lens on the world. For 3 years, Brittany was co-host of the 2019 iHeartRadio Best Political Podcast, Pod Save the People, and served as a 3-time fellow at Harvard's Institute of Politics. Brittany has held top roles, including as vice president of social impact at BET and at Teach for America, and she's a highly sought-after policy advisor who co-founded Campaign Zero. Brittany served as a member of President Obama's Task Force on 21st Century Policing and the Ferguson Commission, helping to lead the country and her community through change during times of tumult. She's dedicated her time, talent, and treasures to ensuring that we all get closer to freedom together. And for that, and the many ways that she's loved on, supported, and protected me, I am eternally grateful. I will always be the chief cheerleader for my sister, Brittany Packnett Cunningham. Thank you for joining me on my pod.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. Yay, pod! Pod's all in the house.
Listen, especially because, my friends laid the foundation. I finally decided to get over the anxiety hump and say, let's just go ahead and do it.
Listen, you got plenty to say, and we trying to hear it. So,
listen, Gatsby, friend, Gatsby. So before we get into it, did you see the latest episode of Summer House?
I did. And I was texting Preston this morning, or yesterday.
I thought about texting both of y'all because I was like, the caucasity of it all.
Listen, but this is what I said on my live with him following the show, 2 weeks ago, maybe?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Oh, sorry about that. That was my fault.
You all right.
This is exactly what I said to him following the show a couple of weeks ago where I did his IG Live after show. There's no shade to Simon and Bria's relationship whatsoever. Although clearly they got some stuff to work out. But so does every relationship.
You're right.
However, I am over the narrative that Black people are not enough. Meaning that we can't occupy all the spaces as producer, executive producer, convener of the friend group, the entirety of the group,
that's it.
Talent, right? And that not be entertaining enough, right?
Yeah.
We have so many times where non-Black people who don't respect us, who don't respect the space, who don't respect the culture, come in and decide that they deserve to be center of attention. And I
Yeah.
know people are gonna be like, "Girl, that's a whole lot of think piece for a little reality TV show."
No,
But no,
it's not. No, it's not.
because
Especially
Black
Black
folks
women to
know this
think that,
every day when we
and
are
given the space that
convening.
reality occupies in our
That's
lives.
right. We are convening. We are minding our business. We
Period.
are having our own fun. And here you come when somebody's trying to honor their passed away line brother, when folks are
That's it.
strolling, when folks are honoring their culture, having a good time in a pink flamingo suit,
That's
drunk,
exactly right.
and
That's right.
being like, and at the end of the day, your girlfriend asked you not to do it.
Well, that's the
So,
part that frustrates me most is that, and then we get the clips of her repeatedly asking him not to do it, and then there's a part of me that's like, so you knew this was going to happen,
see,
but her response was righteous, and I felt her rage. So,
mhm.
also, you chose to be with this white man, and there's a part of me that we don't have to go there now. We don't have time. We'll do it in another space. It's the Gerard Carmichael of it for me, which is like, who's making these decisions? Did somebody decide that he was a value add, especially again on this episode that right before this buffoonery, I was celebrating that the Divine Nine was represented in a way that was thoughtful.
Period.
People were out here strolling, looking beautiful while doing it, and we were taking up space that is ours that has been co-opted
That's right.
by white folks. And I just got questions about the production of it all and the Andy Cohen of it all and
But
the
listen,
reality of it all.
everything is produced.
Yeah, you're right.
Everything is produced. And I'm not just talking about reality television. Everything we are living, breathing, and imbibing right now was produced for us to consume in a particular way.
Mm.
American media, news, policy, government, international conversations, all of these were produced for us to consume in a particular way. And if ever we are audacious enough, whenever we are audacious enough to produce ourselves for ourselves, the spaces either get interrupted or the stream gets cut off. I.e., let's ban TikTok because the production of conversation about international affairs is not being consumed the way that our government actors want us to.
Right.
And this is not conjecture or conspiracy. They
No,
got
that's
up
fair.
on that
Yeah,
Senate floor and said it, right?
yeah,
They got up
yeah.
in fireside conversations and said to each other the propaganda that was coming from Netanyahu's camp is not working on this generation because they are able to produce themselves and the conversations they have with one another.
That's
And
right.
read the books and see the streams from Bassan and so many others in Gaza that directly challenge the narrative they've been
The
presented with
propaganda. Yeah,
for decades.
yeah,
So not only are they questioning, they're learning.
yeah,
So
yeah.
everything is produced. The question is, are we going to produce ourselves for ourselves, or are we going to accept the production as it comes to us? That is always,
Ooh.
whether it's reality television, policy, genocide, I don't care what it is. That is always the question.
This is good. Let's stay in this space. So let's put a fine point on this. So you were naming the ways in which technology has enabled young people in particular to get to a point where they are prioritizing things that the adults say that they shouldn't care about or they should care about in a particular way.
Right.
This brings to mind for me some data that a colleague at AA Glad shared, which is that for LGBTQ youth 18 to 24, their priorities are inflation and high prices, followed by the Israel-Palestine conflict or the genocide happening in Palestine, to be more specific, acknowledging there are other genocides happening, including in the Sudan.
That's
The
right.
third is jobs and the economy. For Black LGBTQ youth, number one is inflation, high prices. Number two, jobs and the economy. Number three, racial justice. And so, one, the importance of us disaggregating data while acknowledging the ways in which data can be useful, while also being often used as a tool to maintain white privilege. Here's my question, very much connected to this theme about the legacy of Brown v. Board, us approaching its 70th anniversary.
Yeah.
Acknowledging that the story about Brown, the way that Brown is produced, let's go there. The way that Brown is produced suggests that it was a landmark decision that significantly shifted the landscape of public education in the United States. More specifically, it answered the question about whether or not we can have segregated schools in our democracy, and, at least in theory, put public schools on a path toward integration. What's the actual story that we should be telling ourselves and teaching our babies as we think about how important public schools are to, one, the development of whole,
Yeah,
thriving Black people? Let's continue to
yeah,
center us. And then, two, defending democracy, acknowledging what Bell Hooks teaches us, which is that, as you know, we both are educators and spend a lot of time thinking and talking about this, but acknowledging the ways in which schools are required to remake our democratic society in perpetuity.
absolutely. No tiny question whatsoever. Here's the story as it was produced for us, the narrative as it was produced for us.
Mhm.
Not, to be clear, by Thurgood Marshall or Daisy Bates or the NAACP LDF and the Black freedom fighters who
Mhm.
used litigation as their means of action. But rather, here's the story that has been produced for us, in particular through generations, by a white media that
Mhm.
refuses to ever hold white people, white systems, and white institutions to account. The narrative that was produced from those folks was that the pure act of what some would say is integrating and what others would say is desegregating
Mhm. Mhm.
a public space, and the pure act of a Black child and a white child sitting next to each other in a
Mhm.
classroom was Dr. King's dream.
Right.
That act alone of integration, or at the very least desegregation, is in and of itself the key that unlocks an equitable future. This is not the truth of the narrative. And we need to question that narrative, in particular, because in a fight for equity, justice, and freedom for Black children, the narrative that has been produced for us actually centers the purity of whiteness, right?
Mm.
It actually centers the idea that if we could just get close enough to a white reality, that
Literally.
we too will be saved, right? That our salvation lies in access to whiteness. That is an extension of a white supremacy culture that
Mhm.
infects everything, that is a smog that we all breathe in, to quote Dr.
Mhm.
Tatum, as I so often do, and that sells us the idea that not only is whiteness our salvation, but that therefore we should uphold it above all else. So it's not just sitting next to the white child, it's learning from the white teacher. It's
Mhm.
learning what the white teacher has decided I should know. It's
Mhm.
speaking how the white teacher and the white principal and the white superintendent and the white school board has dictated is grammatically correct. It is reading the literature that they find valuable, even and especially when I am not present in said literature, right?
Right.
It is about assimilating to a white culture that would have us be dependent on it instead of
Mhm.
be accountable to the harm it's done across the world.
Mhm.
The
Mhm.
true narrative is that Daisy Bates, the brilliant NAACP strategist who lays a lot of the groundwork for the litigation pathway by creating the opportunity and working closely hand in hand with the children and their families of the young folks we now know as the Little Rock Nine, Elizabeth
Mhm.
Eckford, Ernest Green, and so many more, that Thurgood Marshall, who at the time was a lawyer and a strategist in those same spaces, and of course, who would go on to break the color line at the Supreme
Mhm.
Court of the United States. But they and their peers and comrades understood that the fundamental issue with Plessy versus Ferguson was that separate would never be equal. Right.
That's
So
right.
the statute that we can be separate but equal was constantly disproven, because if you walked up to a white drinking fountain and a black drinking fountain, well, the black drinking fountain, the water coming out of it would be green if it was working at all. Right. It
That's
would
right.
be poorly kept. The pipes would be rusty. You don't know what you're getting in your body when you're drinking it. And the white drinking fountain would be sterling and pristine, and the water coming through it would be healthy from the same line, right?
And cooler.
Totally, and cooling and refreshing, right? But two totally
Mm-hmm.
different drinking fountains maintained in two different ways. So the separate was never equal, right? And so Marshall and them said, in order for us to actually experience, be clear, an equity of resources,
Right.
and in order for us to, at minimum, get the same as what they got, get the same new textbooks they got, get the same new facilities they got, get the same funding they got, then we can no longer allow separate but equal to be the law of the land. And so through legal means, that means overturning separate but equal as precedent, and by definition, replacing it with a new precedent that says separate is never equal,
Right.
which inherently involves integration.
Mm-hmm.
It does not mean that integration is the savior. It does not mean that proximity to whiteness or the assimilation of toward white culture is in and of itself its savior. It is saying that if we force you as a country to live up to the ideals that are not only in your Declaration of Independence and in the first parts of your Constitution, but all those things you promised us when we finally won our own freedom, right? That 13th Amendment, that 14th Amendment, that 15th Amendment, if you are going to make good on those things, then it means that we deserve to have equal resources, and we know you're not going to give that to us as long as you're able to isolate us.
Mm-hmm.
That is the truth. And so, because the narrative we were sold was that whiteness had centered itself, in many places, like in my hometown of St. Louis, what communities experienced was not integration.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't equity. It was drain and, at best, desegregation.
Mm-hmm.
So literally in St. Louis, it was called deseg, right? It was not called the integration plan. It was called deseg. It took decades for the ruling of the Supreme Court to actually become practice and praxis in the St. Louis public schools and the general region. But what happened was they chose to do desegregation through busing, as many schools did.
Mm-hmm.
So this utopia that is sold to us in the false narrative is that Black and white people send their children to school next to each other, and therefore they live next to each other in the same neighborhood, and they experience the same tax bracket in that neighborhood, which means that the community resources, the library, the pool, the restaurants, the business centers, the opportunities to own your own business, that all of these are now equal because we're sitting next to each other in school, and the schools have brought us together. But we know better what happened, that when Black kids started having access to white schools, white people moved out and built new suburbs.
That's right.
They went out and built new school districts. That is literally happening right now, where wealthy white people are incorporating their own municipalities. I grew up in one of those municipalities in St. Louis through white suburban sprawl, because suddenly they didn't want to send their kids to the city schools where we can now go. So now you've got a city like St. Louis that, instead of ensuring that entire communities are integrated and having access to equitable resources, no. You're going to take the still poor Black children who have been isolated and ghettoized to the inner city core, take them and put them on a bus at 5 a.m. when they barely slept. Send them out of their community, thereby sending them the message that their community is a place from which they should escape.
That's right.
Over into the suburb, 45 to 90 minutes away, Parkway, Ladue, Lindbergh. I'm talking about St. Louis suburbs here.
Yep.
And you send them 45 to 90 minutes away, and they are surrounded by white children, white culture, white teachers, white people. They're surrounded not only by privilege, but by a culture that sees them and will always communicate to them that they are other. This is not integration. right? This is not us coming together. This is drain happening from Black communities.
That's right.
And Black children being put into hostile learning environments where
Mm-hmm.
they then have to survive as one of a few because, you know, only certain children qualify for the DSEG program. The
That's
rest
right.
of them
Right.
are left to deal with the inequitable inner city schools that still have not received the equitable resources.
Right.
The other thing that happens is that loving Black educators who've been making a way out of no way for decades, for generations,
Mm-hmm.
when there have not been equitable resources, when they did have old textbooks, when they wouldn't have to go buy and create and invent all the things on their own, those children are being taken out of the hands of those loving educators
That's
and being
right.
put in the hands of hostile educators.
That's right. That's
And
right.
so the result of that has been catastrophe, quite frankly. It
Yeah.
has been the psychological idea that where Black people live is a fine place to be from, but it is not a fine place to plant roots or
Yeah.
a fine place to be. It is the internalized idea, therefore, that young impressionable children are getting that Black is wrong and white is right. It is the economic impact of people being pulled from their communities, therefore governments not putting resources into those communities, but having the resources follow the child, which means that the wealthy white suburb gets even more wealthy,
That's
right?
right.
It is the educational impact of still having opportunity and learning gaps at these white suburban schools because those teachers and that curriculum are still not built for those children, even though you sent them there. So you tell me that that school is doing, you know, the suburban school has better academic outcomes than the inner city public school. Meanwhile, if you actually look at the numbers and, to your point, disaggregate the data, the Black children are not doing as well as the white children are doing. But you can mask that by the overall numbers and have people think that your desegregation policies and process were a good thing. So I know I just gave you like the people's history of
No, I appreciate it. Come on. Zen ain't got nothing on you, Howard. Zen ain't got nothing on you, friend.
in a little, you know, 10-minute, you know, sermonette.
Yeah.
But that's the narrative that was
Yeah.
produced for
Yeah.
us versus the narrative that the truth of what we've actually been living.
I appreciate that. You laid the foundation. And for folks who needed that because it was new to them and are making sense of things that have been hidden, this is, you know, what Black feminists refer to as the matrix of domination, the signs, systems, and symbols that allow white supremacy, patriarchy, all of the things to be omnipresent yet hyper invisible. What are the consequences of these systems and practices enduring, right? And so let's add a little bit more color to this canvas. So we're talking 70 years since this legislation moved through the courts, acknowledging that the conditions predated 65 and 66, at least with regard to Brown 1 and 2. We're now having this conversation after one of the worst legislative cycles with regard to the proliferation of anti-Black, anti-queer, acknowledging that Black people in the US are queer, but LGBTQ, sexual minorities. You got Stop Woke. You have what I argue in a lot of instances are legislating genocide for minoritized communities who don't have access to life-saving and affirming care. For folks who just feel like this is fodder or culture wars, what are they missing? What are the consequences of us offering up our democracy to people who are attempting to destroy and continue to divest public education?
You know, it's so important that we understand this culture wars label to be the intentionally minimizing political tool that it is. Because if I can label something culture wars, right? Oh, well, these are just the culture wars, right? We're not talking about the kitchen table issues. We're not talking about, you know, the big issues of the economy and jobs, et cetera. If we allow that language to be dominant, then we do so at our own demise. Number one, because those kitchen table issues that politicians like to call them, jobs, the economy, the cost of healthcare, the cost of college, they then have the space to assign those issues only to working and middle class white Americans, because those are the only people they're trying to appeal to. Meanwhile, David, you already gave us the numbers. You already told us that Black youth, Black people, and specifically LGBTQIA Black youth are concerned about these so-called kitchen table issues.
Yeah.
But secondly, when we are able to, when the powers that be rather are able to diminish our issues, these social issues, as nothing more than culture wars, what it allows people to do is to separate us and our how these kitchen table issues are impacted by these social issues, and then how they disproportionately impact us. So here's what I mean. If I am a Black and queer young person, I have been a political football. Actually, I shouldn't say political football, because that sends the idea that children are being passed between two equal sides, and they're not.
And that ain't it. That ain't it.
Right.
And they actually value footballs.
Hello.
Literally.
I have been, if I am a queer Black youth in high school, let's say, I have been made to be a political symbol by the right of everything that is wrong with America.
Literally.
And in their doing that, they're then able to justify the lack of my lack of access to healthcare, my lack of access to an equitable education by banning the books that reflect me and my experience, by banning me from the athletic experiences that I want to have, and by making me the kind of pariah that then people, in order to save themselves, have to isolate themselves from. So the teachers can't be seen talking to me or trying to help me because it might cost them their jobs. The school board members can't advocate for me too much because Moms for Liberty is going to come along and replace them. Right? I can't be seen as putting too much of the budget as a principal into a Queer Alliance or a Spectrum or any of those kind of student organizations that we know are necessary, not just for student support, but for student leadership development that then matters on a college application. I can't be seen as doing that stuff because then they'll get rid of me too, and then it'll really be bad, right? So now I've been isolated in a time where my socio-emotional learning depends on my access to community.
Literally.
I'm also now not receiving an equitable education. And then what are the impacts of me not receiving an equitable education? I have to fight tooth and nail to get half as much as my peers are getting, to get half as much scholarship money, to get half as many college acceptances, to get half as much access to those keys that are necessary for my future. So now I've settled into a middling existence for my college education if I feel confident and have access and support enough to even go and access it.
That's right.
And now that has impacted my entire life. That's impacted my wages. My wages impact my ability to own a home. My ability to own a home now impacts whether or not I can create generational wealth for my family, both forward and backward, for my elders and for my progeny. So you tell me how the kitchen table issues of jobs and the economy are not directly related to these things you want to dismiss as the culture wars.
They are.
The culture wars are how the right ensure that outcomes for minoritized and marginalized people are perpetually inequitable. The culture wars are how they ensure that we don't have access to the kitchen table issues. That is how they ensure that we are at the bottom of every single life indicator, life expectancy, health, wellness, income. I said health, but wealth, right? All of these things, right? The communities in which we live experience more environmental racism. Our kids got more asthma.
Yeah.
Because y'all have been fighting these things that you want to tell us are just mere culture wars, but have been your tools all along to ensure that we don't have access to the bread and butter stuff.
Right.
To the jobs and the housing and communities that we deserve to not only survive, but thrive.
Yeah, and that we built for free.
That label is intentional because people want to diminish all of the issues that deal directly with us. People want to make them unpopular. People want to make them the third rail and untouchable to say, well, if you spend too much time on those, you're going to alienate your base, right? As politicos, we know we've heard that phrase before. You're going to alienate your base. Well, base is code for working and middle-class white people because you're going to take our votes for granted until, a month or so before the election, like you didn't need the entire time, if that. And then when we come to you asking you, how are you dealing with these kitchen table issues and these social issues that impact our kitchen table issues? you're going to look at us dumbfounded and say, well, we told you we take criminal justice reform seriously, so I don't know what the complaint is.
And we still waiting for that bill.
We're still waiting for it, and it's not the only thing we're concerned about.
That part.
So that language, that massaging of narrative, that production, all of it is intentional, and all of it has real world consequences.
I appreciate that. And I know that a part of what I celebrate is your ministry, the way in which you use the global stage to teach, is to connect these dots and to offer critical literacy, media literacy, the kind of literacy that Bell Hooks spent all this time teaching us. What are you saying to young people who didn't ask to be born into any of this, who didn't consent to the rules of production in terms of how that mediates engagement, who are burdened with the continued changing of the goal post, right? Again, thinking about TikTok and other rescissions. We still haven't talked at all, at least in policy spaces, about the implications of students losing 2 years of significant life markers.
That's right.
Right? Kids who didn't get to go to prom or graduate and go to college or to hug their friends, or the loss that we've experienced in our inability to grieve. What are you saying to young people?
I'm saying do that shit. I'm saying that, like, somebody wrote the other day, I think it was on Threads, and it was something that I had been thinking about, but they did a really good job of putting concise language to it. Essentially, they said, it is really, you really can't scare or threaten a group of people who already feel like you haven't given them anything worth living for in this current iteration of the world, right? And that's not to say that young people are apathetic and suicidal, although we have seen a distinct and marked increase in mental health challenges and suicide ideation from our young people who have endured COVID, right? Who have endured the isolation, who continue to experience a level of dismissal and rebuff from the folks that they have been making their needs known to, who have been telling them to wait their turn. But essentially, like, you've made college unaffordable. Mm-hmm. If I can finally afford to go to college, I can't buy no house afterwards. If I can scrape together enough money to buy a house, it's going to be half the house that I grew up in, right? I'm going to get that house, and I can't afford to fill it with any children or any pets or animals because I can't afford them, their daycare, their healthcare. You not giving us no paid family leave, and I couldn't afford their healthcare even if I, was able to figure out the leave situation. And then what am I birthing these children into? Because the air is not breathable, the water's not drinkable. You're telling me that Flint is everywhere, right? And that those pipes are everywhere. And that you have no intention about actually fixing this. And if by some manner of miracle, I am able to build a life through all of those challenges, you're then telling me that this thing that I'm supposed to be invested in called democracy, that is supposed to be positively influencing the entire world, you don't even have any interest in upholding. That's right. Because all of y'all are acting a little too similarly to each other on some of these issues. That yes, there are important distinctions that we should always make sure that we point, that we point to, right? Because there is one party who is trying to ensure that pregnant people never have the full autonomy over their body again that they deserve, and there is another party who's at least willing to say that should not be true. But you want to tell me that through all of that, I don't even know if this thing called democracy that you raised me on believing in is even going to be here? Right. And that I can't, as a citizen, perform the requirements of the office of citizen by raising my voice to tell you how to do your job as my representative and even be listened to? Because no, you will still use my tax dollars to bomb 15,000 children. You will still use my tax dollars to not at all, create the kind of pressure on a nation state that is operating in ways that are murderous. You won't use that power at all, the power of my tax dollars. No. You're going to just give my tax dollars away in a way I persistently are telling you I don't want. Yeah. To be clear, that's not just those kids on those college campuses. That is the majority of the base of the Democratic Party and a growing majority of America, growing plurality of Americans, right? So You telling me that this is the life I can expect, and you want me to be scared of your threats? I'm not quaking in my boots if you tell me that I can't access that life.
Right. You can
Instead,
have it.
I'm telling you that I have to have the audacity to go and create a new world right now, because what you're leaving me with is not a good world. It's not a just world. It's not a healthy world. It's not a world I can be well in. It's not a world. It's a world I can only at best survive. And I want to thrive. So I'm telling young people right now, do that shit. Because you are confronting systems, institutions, and structures that have to be recreated.
Yeah.
They were created, they've been recreated, they've been recreated, they've been recreated again. And we are living in that time where they need deep revision, where they need full replacement, where they need recreation.
Yeah.
Education needs recreation. What community looks like needs recreation. Our relationship to these machines needs recreation, right? Our relationship to one another as global siblings needs recreation in this moment. And so I'm telling young people to do two things. To one, do that shit,
Okay.
right? Because A, we got your backs. And like, I don't want to say we're relying on you to fix it, because we all got to do this together, but we are receiving strength and inspiration from your audacity.
Absolutely.
Right? And we're being shaken out of our dry places and our comfortable places to stand with you and act with you. The other thing I'm telling them is to be thoughtful about the long term and maintain an understanding about our collective power to set the conditions for our fight. And that especially when I get questions about voting, that is my answer. You're the one who's got to sleep. I'm not going to tell you how to vote. But what I will tell you is what my friend Kayla Reed says all the time, who is a brilliant organizer.
Yes, Kayla.
You know Kayla. She says that we don't vote as the sending of a love letter. We vote to set the conditions of our fight.
That's it.
Because the fight is guaranteed. There is no candidate, no party, no individual, no group of solely elected or appointed individuals that is going to set us free.
That's right.
Right? When we say we are the ones we have been waiting for, that's not just a platitude. That's what that means. Yeah. That we cannot give all of our power over to the people we elect and the people that they appoint to fix everything for us, because that abdicates us of our responsibility in the office of citizen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And even within the office of citizen, there are some folks who like to say, well, I'm HR in this department. Y'all are the leaders. Y'all are the organizers and the activists. Y'all are the change, the on the ground grassroots change agents. I'm gonna just be over here minding my business. And y'all, if you need me to sign a petition, let me know. But I'm gonna be over here. No. Everybody working in this office has a responsibility to give active feedback, pushback, and critique to this government such that it perpetually represents our interests. If it does not, we have and must employ always every single opportunity and strategy and tactic that we have to reconstitute said representation. Yeah. That means that if you need to pull up the recall petition in your community, do it. That means that if you not liking none of these people on this school board and you need to put your name on the ballot, do it. That means that if you need to make sure that you're getting in there and you are a thorn in every city councilor's side until they pass the right bills, then do it. That also means making sure that those at the highest levels of government build agendas that reflect all of us, which, yes, sometimes means playing hardball. It doesn't mean not showing up, though. It doesn't mean not showing up. And I think that if I'm thinking about this moment and setting the conditions for my fight, for our collective fight, I'm standing up on the balcony and I'm looking at how all the pieces are fitting together. I'm looking at how young folks are being recruited into positions so that into the readiness to run, right? I'm looking at how young people are getting ready to run, how they're making sure that their chips are in order so that they can be Maxwell Frost, and we can have more wax Maxwell Frost in Congress than not Maxwell Frost. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. I'm looking at the challengers that are coming to progressive voices in our congressional elections in particular, but also in our gubernatorial and our mayoral elections and our city council / board of alders elections, where there are folks who have been stalwart, brave, and prophetic progressive voices that are being challenged by those who look progressive on paper, but are
Mhm.
being funded by folks who are exactly the opposite. I'm speaking very specifically to the Summer Lees of the world who fought back her challenger
Mhm.
that was funded
Mhm.
by a particular lobby. I'm talking about Cori Bush. I'm talking about Ayanna Pressley. I'm talking about AOC. I'm talking about folks who we can spend all day talking about whether or not they are perfect. But guess what? There are no perfect politicians because there are no perfect people.
People,
But there are
period.
folks who have held closely to a platform and have been willing to be pushed by the people and be responsive to said people who need to not only maintain their role in Congress, but who need to make sure that they have more friends than enemies in Congress. So we need to be protecting those who are already there and
Yeah.
electing more people to join them, right?
Yeah.
Then we need to be electing people who are going to protect them, right? Who are going to make sure that at the city level, at your local level, in your municipality, are going to be making sure that those edicts that are coming from Washington, D.C. are properly regulated in your own school system, right?
Municipality.
In
Yeah.
your own city, in your own municipality, right? Because that's how all of this flows and works. I'm standing up and looking at the balcony. I'm not just looking at the White House. I'm looking at how the White House will impact the Supreme Court. I'm looking at the Senate and how that will impact the Supreme Court. I'm looking at the White House and how that will affect the leadership of all of these agencies, these government agencies that regulate everything from school funding to environmental regulation, and who those people are going to select, and how those people are also folks with whom I need to set the proper conditions for my fight. And who would I rather be negotiating with? Who would I rather be fighting? And how can I push those people to put the right things in their platform and make the promises to which we can hold them accountable? Right? So I'm telling young people to do that shit, and I'm telling young people to stand up on the balcony and keep the entire forest in mind and to move strategically, because our opponents move strategically and they move intentionally for long periods of time. We are in an era now where Roe is no longer the law of the land. Not
Yeah.
because some people got together a year ago or 5 years ago or over one or
No,
two
6
elections and
decades
said,
ago.
we're going to flip this. It's been over 50 years,
Yeah.
50 years that they have waged that war, and they've been putting the puzzle pieces together all along. I want us to think like that, because there are more of us than there
Then there
are of
are
them.
them.
If we get together and think like that, there's nothing we can't accomplish.
I don't disagree. And I want to name the thing that I don't want to do because I'm about to do it, and it's to play devil's advocate. And I'm naming that because,
You're
right,
not
like
playing devil's advocate. You are adding color to the conversation.
I appreciate that,
The
in
devil don't
part
need no
because
advocates, and
that's
that's
exactly
what
right.
the
And we don't
advocates
need to
for
teach.
anyway.
We don't need to teach kids that, which is what I was
Yes.
processing. So what I'm sitting with, in addition to all of that, is what about the persons, the people who are unable to see the balcony,
Mm-hmm.
who are mired in knowing that, as Brian Stevenson says, systems work as they're designed to,
Yep.
that public education in this country was never designed to love or affirm Black
Yep.
children who are a part of the, for every 100,000 Black Americans, nearly 400 of us have died from coronavirus. The
Yeah.
number of Black children who have been homeschooled in part because the justifiable mistrust that we've always had in the public school system has been
Yeah.
exacerbated as a result of COVID, has jumped nearly 20% since the fall of 2020. For folks who are not apathetic, right? Because I think that's the thing that the media gets wrong. Like, what's
No,
missed
they're
when
not
people
empathetic at
suggest that
all.
we are apathetic is that we have justifiable mistrust.
That's right.
What do we say? What are we saying to those members of our beloved community who are just over this shit?
Yeah. And
And
understandably so.
understandably so.
Listen, I think we have to get interested in each other.
Mm.
And I say this in two ways. One, I put full onus on the institutions that have ceded their legitimacy, right? And I said this to the New Republic not too long ago. To your point, folks who are feeling like they need to tap out of the system are not apathetic.
Right.
It's because they've seen too much. They've experienced too much. They know too much, right?
Yeah.
They're not uninterested. They're extremely interested. That's why they're here.
Well,
And they're looking up and they're saying the ideals of this country that were supposed to be embodied in these institutions can't actually be upheld by these institutions because the institutions are rotten from the inside. How do I uphold the legitimacy of a Supreme Court decision
Let's go there.
when multiple members of the bench have been credibly accused of sexual assault and still been appointed
Semicolon.
by the majority of the U.S. Senate? How can I respect the legitimacy of precedent coming out of that court when the last two justices needed to overturn Roe were shoved through by the wildest president in our history? And that's saying a lot, because, you know, we had enslaver presidents and people like Andrew Johnson, who was the first to get impeached, right? Because he was over here doing reparations to enslavers, right?
That part.
How am I supposed to respect the legitimacy of a body that just got the first Black woman on the bench?
Yes.
When Black women have been fostering democracy from our teat.
When y'all want Black women to be your mamalas.
Hello?
Let's say it.
Hello?
Hello, somebody. Yep.
She wanted to say a different word, but I'm going to leave it alone.
Yep.
How am I supposed to respect the legitimacy of a court where it feels like every single week or month there is another ethical violation being reported on by multiple credible newsrooms that have not only not been answered to, not only have not been held to it, the person doing them has not only not been held to account, we don't even know how to hold them to account.
Yeah.
There's not even a process before us that says get this many signatures on this many petitions to recall this justice, and this many people have to vote yes on it. There's not even a process for us to say if we just lobby these 60 senators, we can get this person out, this person being Clarence Thomas. There's not even a clear democratic process for this thing. What even is the process? How am I supposed to trust an institution and the decisions coming out of it when the institution continues to show itself corrupt, racist, sexist, misogynistic, xenophobic, homophobic, transphobic, and on top of it, as a citizen, I can't even do anything about it.
That's it. Yeah.
So I put the onus on the institutions because it belongs there.
Period. Yeah.
The second thing, though, is that, and this is what I mean by we have to get interested in each other. We have to get interested in each other enough to understand why people have lost the trust and are feeling like tapping out, and then give them the opportunities to make a different choice and not judge the choice that they make.
Plural. Opportunities, plural.
Opportunities, plural. So that means you cannot condescend people and say, if you don't vote or you don't vote blue, then you ain't got no reason to complain. Baby, if your license getting cut off, you got a reason to complain.
Period. Okay? Right.
Like, well, if you don't vote blue, no matter who, then you're just giving it away that you're voting for Trump. No, I'm sitting on my couch because I don't like either one of them. And nobody's giving me the space to talk about that. Right? Because if we can't meet people where they are, we most certainly cannot reach them. We most certainly cannot have a vibrant and fruitful conversation where I learn something and you learn something too. So we have to get interested in each other enough, not to condescend each other, but to see each other as valuable enough neighbors, comrades, and human beings to have your opinion be valuable, to have it be held in a trustworthy place, to actually sit down and say, why do you want to tap out? I really want to understand. To identify where we have commonalities, right? To really say, no, what is it that you need so that I can go and advocate for these things through any access points I have, right? To show up as your champion and your friend and an active listener, and not just somebody pointing fingers at you, ready to blame you when stuff doesn't go the way that I want it to go. When we get interested in each other and when we do that, we open up the door for these opportunities for us to learn and grow together, right? For us to have the conversation that says, I get it, you don't love him, I don't love him either. But guess what? Here's how we see the forest. Let me pull you up onto the balcony with me if you can't find the stairs, right? And if after those opportunities you still say, this is still where I'm at, hey, baby, I still love you. I still want the best for you. And I'm going to still be out here fighting for you. Not move to the side then and everybody else can get the good. That's not freedom. That's not liberation. That's not mutual respect. And unless we have mutual respect, we're not building anything. And I cannot communicate to people a potential different way of trying on what being a citizen means if they think I don't even respect them, if they think all I'm going to do is point my fingers at them, if they think all I'm going to do is tell them that, well, all of this bad in the world is your fault.
Yeah.
That's not helpful. It's certainly not helpful with young people, because we've been young people before and we know ain't nobody telling us to do it because I said so and we're actually like excitedly doing it. Unless
No.
you know.
Unless I love you, right? So this again goes back to things we learn as educators, which
That's
is
right.
kids don't care what you know unless they first know that you care
That's right.
about them and their well-being. And all of this makes sense to me. So before we ask that last question that you offered about my words, not yours, each of our ability to try on citizenship,
Mm.
dream with me. It's now 2054. What is the state of education in America, and what are you asking of those who are listening to us to do to assist us in getting there? What's the call to action?
So 2054 is 30 years from now. That will be the year that my son will be 32 years old. My
My
black,
sis.
precious, beautiful 1 pound 9 ounce to now 30 pounds, micro preemie, born in the DMV, raised in the DMV baby will be 32 years old. And I will be looking at him prayerfully 32 years from now. And I pray that when I look at my 32-year-old child in 30 years, I will see a young, beautiful, affirmed, secure, confident Black genius who has not had any of that squeezed out of him. That's my job as his mother. That's Reggie's job as his father. That's our village's job as people who love and nurture him just like you do, Uncle David, just like Uncle Ray does, the whole. And it is also the job of the systems and institutions that he will encounter. It is especially the job of those who don't just teach him, but grow him, right? So I need educators who understand that that's their job. B, I need educators who understand that the classroom is the first line of the revolution. And so I want them to look at him as them building a revolutionary, not to go and carry out their vision of the world, but to have the skill, the confidence, and the consciousness to go and carry out his vision for the world, for him to create the world he wants in exactly the way that he wants to do it. I am judging everything by how my child is, right? As our African ancestors would say, how are the children?
Yes.
Right? That is the question by which we judge the quality of society, because if the children are well, society is well. Yes. The children right now are not well. I want my child to be well. I want all of our children to be well, because that's what they deserve. That's what we all dream for them. When we do this wildly audacious thing and bring life into a broken and fallen world, right? And so in 30 years, I want to look at my 32-year-old baby and know that and be able to actively see that his genius is thriving because the people who love him and his educational experiences created the pathway for that.
Yeah, for folks who can't see me in this moment, I am talking through tears.
Uncle DJJ.
Yeah, I count it a personal privilege to be invited into the process of supporting our revolutionary babies. We're having this conversation in between my sister, my mother Nicole Johns, her birthday, and my mother's birthday, and the ability to be uncle, the ability to show up and support Jordan, Jet, Jax, Rachel's Jet. Our MVP is one of my greatest blessings, and I look forward to MVP receiving this as a contribution to the time capsule that he will grow to appreciate over time, in knowing that the universe and our ancestors conspired for him to come through some mighty people.
Yeah.
And what I know, Brittany, when I met you with Brittany Packnett, is that you've always been a bad Bama Jamma. Women who love Black people.
Friend. Like that's a mighty blessing.
Let's land this. So 2 questions. How can people find, connect with, and support you in all your leading?
That is so kind. My website is BrittanyPacknett.com. Lots of things are assembled there. I'm all across social media at Miss Pat Getty, but sometimes I be on a break. Right now I'm like on a little break. So, it just be like that sometimes. And my podcast, Undistracted, you can find it wherever you stream your podcast. In season 3.
Yes.
It's in pre-production right now. And it has some surprises in store. So we're very excited.
Boom. Is there a campaign or action related to the legacy of Brown that you want us to amplify?
I want us to amplify the equity march and the equity work of the National Black Justice Coalition that happens all year round, but we can all make special contributions to this June in Washington, D.C.
Yes. I love that. NBJC.org.
Thank you for your leadership and your brilliance. We're following your lead, my friends, and we're better for it.
Listen, we lead it together.
I love it.
We lead it together. I love it, and I love you. Thank you.
I love you. Thank you.
Be sure to subscribe to the Teach the Babies podcast with Dr. David Johns on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. I thank you in advance for letting us audition for a spot on your favorites list.